This is a problem that people often face when developing a first application in Vue. We have here a list of things, in this case animals. Each one is displayed as a button, and this list is generated via Vue. And we would like, if we click on one of them, to go to a URL, a separate page, that gives us more detail. In this case, it just prints the name, because I want to be quick in developing this sample application. But you see, this is a show animal / 2, because 2 is the ID of the cat. And I want to go here whenever I click, say, on the cat button. So, how to implement this? There are many ways of doing it. Let's look at the code, basically. This is a Vue for that generates the animals. And for A in animals, I display a.animalName. Now, the JavaScript code that produces this in Vue is extremely simple. I have an init method for the app that does a get call to a getAnimals URL, which will return the list of animals. And then, based on the result, I set the list of app Vue animals, which, initially is empty. You can see it here. And then it's set to the server response. And the server methods are also quite simple. If you go into controllers, there is a setup method that you need to do first that just inserts some animals in the database for you to play with. But otherwise, the getAnimals function here, all it does is that it accesses the database to fetch the rows of animals and it returns them to you. Okay? So this is one of the simplest Vue apps that displays a list of content. Essentially, it fetches the list of content, it displays, but the real question for you is, how can we associate a behavior, essentially a link to each one of these buttons that are generated in this way? Okay? There are several solutions and I want to go over them. First, I would like to cover a solution that actually does not work. One is very tempted to do this. Oh, let's change this div here into an into an anchor. Let me leave it off class button so that it displays as a button. And now let me here add an href attribute, which is, oh, I know how to generate URLs. Let me generate the URL. And this URL will point to page show animal for the particular animal, which is a.id. This should work, right? Well, let's give it a try. So let me save this code, reload. What we get instead is a horrible server error. And if we go look at it, we see that it complains that name A is not defined. And the name A that is not defined is this one over here. The problem is essentially that this code from line 9 to 15 is complete nonsense. The problem is the following. We are mixing things that happen on the server, such as this template evaluation, with the things that happen on the client that is in the browser, such as this loop Vue for. What we think or wish is happening, but is not happening at all, is that we executed this Vue for to put out every animal block, and then we have the href behave correctly. But this is not at all what is happening. What is happening is very different. What is happening is that on the server, you try to fill in this template, because template evaluation happens only on the server. So you want to create a URL to show animal a.id. And now your code is complaining that it has no clue what a is, because a is a variable that will be defined only later by Vue in the client in response of executing this Vue for. So this is a non-starter, and this is a typical error that people make when developing with Vue for the first time. They essentially confuse in their minds the execution on the server in which templates are evaluated with the execution on the client, where there is no template language anymore available and all you can use is Vue.js. So given that we cannot do that, how do we do it? Well, one idea, and one of the best ideas, is to produce URLs on the server and pass them to the client. So imagine that for every animal A, I also had a display URL that I could use. Then I could write this code, which is similar to what I wrote before. This would be again an A tag. I would again have an href property, which points to a dot, I can call it show URL. Okay, and in fact this would not be an href but a colon href to mean that the value of this href property has to be obtained via view via this parameter. Okay, so now I have to associate to each animal its show URL, and this is actually easy enough to do on the server. So on the server, in the getAnimals code, you see that I produce all the rows and then I return them to the server. So here is the ideal place where to put my URL production. I can say for r in rows, and I can say r, I call it show URL. You see, because I selected rows as list, rows is simply a sequence of a list of dictionaries, and I can add to each dictionary one more entry, that is the show URL. And here I can use my URL helper and say this goes to show animal, and then I have to obtain the ID of the animal, which I use in this way. Notice that I'm referring to it as a dictionary. Okay, so this should work. This will produce a URL that goes to show animal followed by the animal ID. And so if I restart my code, and then I reload this page, this should work. Now this should be a link to the second animal, and indeed it works. So this is a working solution. One of the benefits of this solution is that if you wish, because you generate the URLs on the server, it's very easy to sign them should you need to do so. You remember, URLs can only be signed on the server. So if I want, I can say signer is equal to URL signer. Okay, and in this case, if here I want to verify the signature, I can say URL signer.verify. Okay, and this will also work. I need to reload, obviously. Okay, and when I reload the page, now this URL to see the cat is signed. It has a long signature, and when I visit, you see there is a signature. The signature is accepted. So if you need signed URLs, the URLs can only be signed on the server, and so the easiest solution is to produce them on the server and pass them to the client along your list of products. Now, for curiosity, let's explore a couple of other possible solutions. Imagine that for some reason you do not want to pass back this list of URLs. There are cases in which the possible URLs on which the user can click are so many that passing them all in advance would require a very large payload. What if we actually asked the server for URLs on demand? So let me remove these two lines. The server would simply have the normal product row list of animals, and we will produce instead another method that on demand gives us the URL for a particular animal. So action get animal URL. Okay, and so this will be a get method. For instance, I can say action.uses the database. I'm not sure we need it, but we need the URL signer. Okay, and the idea is this, that this is a get method. We will be passed the animal ID, and we will have to reply with the URL for the animal. So animal ID is equal to integer of request params animal ID. Get animal ID. And then once we have the animal ID, we trust that it is a reasonable animal ID. This URL would probably need to be signed, so let me write URL signer dot verify, so that not everybody can ask me for signed URLs. And so once this is done, sorry, I forgot def get animal URL. So once we are at this point, I can say return a dictionary, in which I can say that the URL is the URL of show animal, okay, then animal ID, okay, and signer is equal to URL signer. So this is a method that returns my URLs to view animals on demand. So I need to tell the view how to access this URL. So get animal URL, right? This is a function to get the URL of the place where you can get the animal URL. So you can do this. Okay, and what we have to do in the view. So here we cannot have this href anymore, okay? So we don't know where to go. But what I can do is I can say that when you click here, I can call a function that is called goToAnimal, and I can say here the index of the animal to which you want to go. All right. Now this is a new method that we have added, so I have to go into view and say among the methods I can say goToAnimal app goToAnimal. Okay, and now I have to write this method to go to an animal. And so let's write it in stages. Let me first write the stage in which I actually ask the server for the URL where to go to. app.goToAnimal is equal to a function that gets the animal index, okay, and it behaves as follows. It says let animal is equal to app view animals of an animal index. Okay, so I fish out the animal to which I want to go, and then I should do axios get to a URL that I have not defined. I will define it now. Okay, so there is let get an animal URL is equal to this is let me XML get animal URL, because this is the URL used to get the animal URL, so it has this funny name. Let me just check that I hooked it up correctly to the controller. Get animal URL, yes, it seems. Okay, so here I do an axios get to get animal URL with some params that are animal ID, which is a.id. Okay, and once I do this, I can say then function result, and for the moment let me not do anything with the URL. Let's simply say console log we got the URL, and then I can say r.data.url. This will enable us to do a little bit of testing before we go on. So let me test this code. We restart. Okay, we reload the index page, I guess. So we go back and we reload. And then we can look at the inspection, so we can check that actually the network calls are being performed and the reply arrives back to us. Let me shrink a bit this window so we can keep an eye on both. Okay, and so now when I click on a cat, I should see a server call that to fetch the cat URL, and I see it in fact. So I call get animal URL, I can look at the request is empty. I can look at the headers, and I see that I'm requesting the URL for animal ID is equal to 2. I can look at the response, and I can see that the URL is this one. So it actually worked. Okay. So now I have gotten the URL to which I should go when I click somewhere. You see, if I click in some place, I'm asking for the URL to go to, but of course I don't go there. So how can I actually go to a URL from JavaScript? You know, if the user clicks somewhere in an anchor tag that has an href, the browser is in charge of sending the user to that location. But now we have to initiate this change of page from JavaScript. How do we do it? There are two ways of going to a location programmatically. The simplest is simply to say window.location is equal to r.data.url. So the window.location is essentially the location of the window, what you see displayed in the browser location bar. And if I set the location to another page, to another URL, the browser will go there, just as if a user typed it in. So this is one way of doing it, and if I do this, you will see that the code will suddenly start to work. I have to reload, and now if I click on cat, I go to the cat page, I can go back, I can go to the horse page, and so on and so forth. This is one solution. The other solution is interesting and somewhat controverted, it's a little bit more robust. In some browsers, it used to be the case, and maybe now they have solved it, that if you set the window.location property in this way, the navigation, that means the browser history and the forward and backward buttons may not reflect correctly the places where you have been. So another solution is the following, is to say let A is equal to document, create element, and you create an A element. So essentially I'm creating an anchor tag that is actually not attached anywhere to the page. It's just an anchor tag that is in the page but not displayed anywhere, right? I'm not inserting it in the tree directly. Then I say a.href is equal to my URL, our data URL. And finally I say a.click. And so this is straight out of Magic, because I'm creating an element to the page and then I'm simulating user interaction with it, but it actually works. And so if I reload this page, I can now click on cat and I again go to the cat and I can go back. Okay, so this is yet another way of doing it. Finally, let me mention one more solution. This solution is not as good as the previous ones, but I want to mention it for the sake of completeness. So let me essentially define let show animal base URL. So this is a basic URL without the animal ID, in which I say something like is equal to the URL helper for show animal. Okay, and I leave out the animal ID. So this is just the base URL. At this point, I can go into the index.html. I'm already here, in fact. And so in this div, where I display the animal name, I can say click is equal to, again, go to animal for a certain a.id, a.index actually. Okay, and then I can fix the JavaScript, and again I can add go to animal app.go to animal and then here I can write app go to animal is equal to a function that gets animal index, and it does let a is equal to app who animals of animal index, and And then at this point we have the base URL, we have the animal and so its ID, and we can complete the URL. Let animal URL is equal to base, animal base URL. How did I call it? I called it show animal base URL. So I take this and I concatenate to it a slash, and I concatenate to it the animal ID, which will be converted to string. And I trust that this is fine because there will be no funny character in a numeric ID. And once I have this, I can again create an element and click on it. So I can say let button is equal to document create element A, similarly to before, okay? And then I can say button.href is equal to a URL, and I can say button.click. Okay, and so this should work. Let me give it a try. So I refresh, and if I click on a cat, I go to the cat and I can go back. So this seems to work. The real problem with this solution is this, that the URL is completed in the browser. And so I can't quite sign it in the proper way. I cannot sign it, the whole URL at least, because there is this ID that is not known on the server, okay? So this show animal base URL cannot contain a signature that includes the a.id. In fact, this works only because in the controller, the show animals, I removed the portion where I checked the signature. If here I wrote something like URL signer.verify to check that you're accessing using a signed URL, and if I restarted the code, this would break. So the limitation of creating URLs in the client is that you cannot sign them properly, because only the server knows the secrets that are used to sign URLs. So if I do this, I can reload, and this will work, but when I try to visit the cat, it will give me forbidden because the signature verification fails. So my general advice is to always create URLs on the server where you can properly sign them and you can properly create them, and give them to the client, either all of them if you can afford it, or else on demand if there are too many.